In 1979, a new wave of young artists had the UK in a dancing frenzy. Yes, this was the height of the disco era, but this particular commotion in the clubs was centred around the Two-Tone record label, created by the Specials founder Jerry Dammers.
I always had this idea of a label like Stax or something, but a label with an identity and a definite sound.
With its distinct ska beat and fashion sense, the Two-Tone movement enchanted the nation's youth. In fact, it sold over 2 million records in less than a year. And it wasn't just about good tunes, important as they were, because at the heart of Two-Tone was a powerful message of racial equality.
Two-Tone was more effective than Rock Against Racism because, you go to a gig and you see black mates and white mates dancing together or whatever. That was Two-Tone defined. The message was in the music.
And the legacy is powerful as well. Current stars like Amy Winehouse and Lily Allen include special songs in their sets. And with the band talking about the possibility at least of reforming, now's the time to explore how it all came about. I'm Paul Sexton. Welcome to Too Much Too Young, the story of Two-Tone Records.
You're done too much too young. You're married with a kid when you could be having fun with me.
Over this two-part series, I'll be talking Two-Tone with all the key people in the ska revival movement that burnt so brightly nearly 30 years ago. A movement that, as well as the Specials, introduced us to bands like The Selector, The Beat, and Madness.
An earthquake is erupting, but not in Orange Street.
Culminating in what many people think of as a contender for Britain's greatest #1 single, Ghost Town. So, pork pie hats in position if you would, Harrington jackets on, we're heading back to a time when British youth were ready for a brand new beat. By 1979, the punk movement, which had ripped up the rock rulebook a few years previously, was beginning to look and sound tired and boring. The Sex Pistols had self-destructed, and to some fans, bands like The Clash and The Jam had sold out to the establishments, partly because they dared to have hit singles. The music scene was crying out for something fresh and exciting, and it would come, of all places, from Coventry. The West Midlands city wasn't Britain's prettiest place of the 1970s by any stretch of the imagination. After a relentless bombing campaign by the Luftwaffe during the Second World War, Coventry had been quickly rebuilt, and mostly in concrete. High-rise flats and grim shopping centres were encased by an imposing ring road that encircled the city. Back then, Pete Waterman was a young DJ and record shop owner born and bred in Coventry.
By the mid-70s, early 70s, Coventry started to show the stresses of losing industry. I mean, industry had started to close in the 60s, and the car industry was just about finished in Coventry by the early 70s. It was starting to become a quite bleak place.
Lead singer of the Specials, Terry Hall.
I lived in the centre of town on the edge of a place called Hillfields, and it was pretty grim growing up. It was pretty poor and pretty violent, and my school was just awful. I couldn't wait to leave. I mean, like many people, I couldn't wait to leave. There needed to be a band to come from somewhere like Coventry to talk about maybe the problems in Coventry, because nobody else was addressing it, and people were just watching this city decline.
Art student Jerry Dammers was already thinking along the same lines. Literally the son of a preacher man, Jerry had been interested in pop music from an early age.
I saw The Who singing My Generation on Top of the Pops. I guess I was about 10 or something, and I just became a fan, decided that I wanted to form a band, and I was determined. I even made a tape and sent it to John Lennon at the age of 10. My brother was saying, "You're an idiot," and I was going, no, it's going to happen.
By the mid-70s, keyboard player Jerry was already a name on the Coventry music circuit, and he began to have an idea for a new type of music.
I used to love the reggae at punk gigs. I could only take so much thrashy punk. It got a bit of a headache after a while, and it was relief that there was a lot of heavy dub reggae played at punk gigs. Without that, I don't think punk would have ever survived, because if it had just been that all night, people would have just gone crazy, you know. So the reggae part of it was a huge part, and I just thought it'd be good to try and combine the two things, you know.
It's a funky reggae party, and it's alright. What did you say?
So in 1977, Jerry set about putting together his vision for a hybrid punk and reggae band. Coventry's music scene was modest, but since the influx of Caribbean immigrants in the 50s and 60s, black and white musicians had been playing together for years. From Coventry band The Selector, Neil Davies.
All of the people that are involved in Two Tone, we all played in different kinds of bands. There's been bands being formed all the time with those same personnel. We'd all played a bit of disco, played a bit of soul, played a bit of blues, played a bit of reggae. Just about all the people who were involved had that kind of multi sort of black music style of playing, and it was really Jerry who came along and pulled things together out of really what was there already, you know.
Pete Waterman.
The reason why Coventry was so important to the punk movement and to what followed is because it really was isolated. It was almost surrounded, and the musicians in it and all the people within it created a subculture. And I think that the whole of the two-tone thing came out of that subculture.
Jerry was well acquainted with Coventry's expanding music scene and started getting a group together from people he knew.
Well, I must admit, I kind of went round Coventry and got the cream of all the bands in Coventry, the best people from the different bands.
Jerry soon persuaded bass player Horace Panter, Barbadian drummer Silverton Hutchinson, and Jamaican guitarist Linval Golding to be in his band. Lead guitarist Roddy Radiation joined next and gave the band a punk edge, with a James Dean lookalike singer called Tim Strickland completing the lineup. They called themselves the Automatics and began playing local venues, but it soon became apparent that Tim couldn't cut it, and Jerry began searching for another vocalist. He found him at the vocal helm of a Coventry punk band.
I asked Terry to get involved. He was in an identikit Coventry punk band called Squad, which were, you know, they were great, but they were just like every other punk band.
Terry Hall.
I met Jerry 1977. There was a club in the centre of town that people would just hang out in, people from bands, and Jerry was doing a gig with the Coventry Automatics, and he asked if my band would support them. So we did, and he wanted to know if I would try singing with his band.
I can remember all these punks pogoing on the dance floor, and I told him that that wasn't punk, you know, and I invented my own dance, which was a bit embarrassing, but just to make the point, you know, and I was kind of hopping around like a frog on the dance floor. And I was saying, that's the true punk, Terry, it's not about copying. And I think I got through to him, that's it's about creating fashion, not following fashions.
It was a strange old mix of musicians and styles, but it seemed to work. Local DJ Pete Waterman.
It shouldn't have worked, because you almost had a funk bass player with two toasters, a punk guitarist, and Jerry just doing whatever he felt came naturally. But then again, that's sometimes how things work. But the one thing that, from the very first time I ever saw their rehearsal, it was Jerry's songs. Jerry's songs were just haunting to me. They were just great, great little songs.
A multiracial band from a decaying city, the Automatics had an agenda from the start. Here's Terry.
We wanted to address subjects like racism and unemployment and, you know, the decline of a city. And I think anybody with half a brain would have wanted in on that, because it was so apparent.
Around Easter of 1978, Coventry record producer Pete Waterman put up the money for the band to record some demos in London.
I did 4 tracks, and I took these to everybody. And at the time, I was having hits, and the only guy I could get interested at that time passed on the ground he didn't think punk reggae worked. And it was heartbreaking because, I mean, I was taking these guys, these A&R guys, to gigs where it was absolutely sold out and people were just going absolutely mad. And not one of them saw it, they just went, it's punk reggae. I mean, I was shocked because to me they were playing pop songs.
Not long after that, Pete and the Automatics parted company. Jerry Dammers.
Nothing against him because he did help us out, you know, but he made the mistake of trying to teach Terry to dance, and I just realised this was wrong. You know, he's from a different variety, really. He was trying to show Terry how to swivel his hips, and if you've seen Pete Waterman swivelling his hips, that's enough to put anybody off swivelling your hips for life.
Jerry's plan to kickstart their career was to get on a big tour, so he travelled to London with the express purpose of meeting one of the most powerful men in the new wave, the Clash manager, Bernie Rhodes.
I only had to tell Bernie, he didn't want to hear it, I just told him the idea, you know, and I told him it was like punk reggae and there were black people and white people in the same band, and he just said, right, well, you're on the tour then. And I don't think he ever saw us before then.
The Specials supported the Clash for their 1978 UK tour. These were the days when there were still 4 weekly UK music papers, and from one of them, Sounds, journalist Gary Bushell was at their first gig.
I was lucky enough to have seen the first ever gig they did as the Specials. Right back in 1978, I went to Aylesbury Friars Club for the Clash tour. I think it was the first properly commissioned review I ever did for Sounds. And the opening band on the bill were the Specials, who until the night before had been called the Coventry Automatics. I was really intrigued by that sort of mix they had, that punky reggae party they had going on. There was reggae rhythms, there was punk stuff, there was attitude. It was just an intriguing thing to see. More than anything, I remember Neville, because Neville was a bundle of energy, and Neville was bouncing about the stage and either dressed in a suit or dressed up as a judge or tearing his clothes off. He was always very visual, very exciting. He was the one you wanted to watch.
Neville Staple was already a Specials roadie, but joined the band full-time on the Clash tour.
And they were supporting the Clash, and I was on the mixing decks. And they were playing like Guns of Navarone and stuff like that. Then I grabbed the mic up from the mixing desk because the atmosphere was bloody electric. So basically, probably the excitement that made me grab the mic.
And Neville was a full-time member from that day forward. The Specials' live set was a combination of Jerry's original songs and old ska classics that had been popular with the skinhead movement of the late 1960s. One of the favourites was a version of Toots and the Maytals' Monkey Man. Here they are performing it live in 1979.
Hugging up a big monkey man. I never saw you, I only heard of you. Hugging up a big monkey man. It's so light, never to be. Hugging up a big monkey man. It's so light, never to be. Hugging up a big monkey man. Now I know that, now I understand. You're turning a monkey Barbie. Now I know that, now I understand. You're turning a monkey Barbie. Aye, never to be. Hugging up a big monkey man. Aye, never to be. Hugging up a big monkey man.
After the Specials passed the test of surviving the Clash tour, Bernie Rhodes took the band under his wing. Gary Bushell.
Bernie's idea was, because punk was so fresh, he would hold them back until the time was right, which meant just basically put them in a rehearsal studio and not let them do anything. So where they felt they were ready to go in 78, they didn't actually emerge until well over a year later.
The band thought they were ready for the big time. Guitarist Linval Golding.
Bernie Rhodes was managing the Clash, said, no, you guys are not ready. He decided to send us off to France to get the whole thing together, because visually we just didn't look like a band, you know? So Bernie sent us off to France to get the music and the visual together. It looks like a band, you know?
It didn't go quite to plan. Jerry Dammers.
He neglected to hire a van, Bernie, so he put us on the ferry. We were quite surprised. We went to Dover in the van, and then he told us to unload all the gear and get on the ferry, so we had to drag it all onto the ferry by hand. And then the other side, we had to hitchhike with amplifiers.
Frontman Terry Hall.
He said it was character building, which I guess it was. But, you know, it's no fun turning up in the middle of Paris at 3 a.m. and not have anywhere to stay or money. Or I remember we slept on a bench, and, you know, character building I can do without that. Do you know what I mean? I'd rather have no character.
There were more problems when they finally arrived in Paris.
There was also a lot of problems at the hotel because the Damned had been there the week before and smashed the front door, and so the hotel manager decided that because we looked like punks that we had to pay for the damage that the Damned had done, and they confiscated all our equipment. Then there's the owner of the club arrived with a gun and got our equipment back.
Once they were back home, Bernie Rhodes was quickly dispensed with, and Jerry Dammers was left with a band on the verge of breaking up. Drummer Silverton Hutchinson quit, and guitarist Linville Golding, who lived in Gloucester, was finding times particularly tough.
At the time, I remember I had my daughter there, and I had to take care of her financially with no money. I must have been crazy. There's times when I had to drive from Coventry to go to Gloucester, right? And I have to drive at a certain speed to make sure I get to Gloucester. Because if I drive any faster, I'm afraid I'm going to run out of petrol in the middle of nowhere. I have to literally beg, steal and borrow to make sure that my daughter had something. It was very, very tough. But I had this vision that this is going to work.
The band regrouped, and Jerry had an idea for a new direction. The punk reggae sound had actually been around for a while, with bands like The Clash and The Ruts already blazing that trail. Jerry's idea was to go back even further into the history of Jamaican music.
We had a bit of a rethink, and there was a record by Capital Letters, who were a dub band called Smoking My Ganja in Birmingham, and it had a ska beat, and that's where I got the idea that we should do ska, because I thought it would bring the two things together, and it was my idea. I'd like to make that quite clear once and for all. It was my idea that the Specials did ska.
Ska music was a precursor to the reggae rhythm. It was similar to American R&B, but with the emphasis on the offbeat. Ska was the hot sound in Jamaica in the early 60s and first gained UK popularity with songs like Millie Small's My Boy Lollipop in 1964. It became popular again in the late 60s when the UK skinhead movement adopted ska as their music of choice. In 1978, with the Jam and Sham 69 leading a mod and skinhead revival, taking the Specials in the ska direction was a shrewd move by Jerry. The band had learned from Bernie Rhodes they needed the full package to be successful, and Jerry decided they needed their own label.
I always had this idea of a label like Stax or something, but a label with an identity and a definite sound. The Stax had the drum kit nailed to the floor, and all their records sounded the same. They had their own sound, so I always had that idea that the label should develop its own sound, you know. And the whole idea of doing your own record, you know, started with Rough Trade, you know, and the whole independent label thing came up. That was very exciting because before that you thought records came from another planet.
Jerry called the label Two Tone and came up with a black and white checked design, which represented perfectly what the multiracial Specials were all about.
Jerry was able to have a very clear idea of just how to get it across.
Neil Davies.
I suppose you'd call it marketing, I suppose. He was able to design that visual look of the label and to describe it as two-tone, to bring it down to just that image. It was brilliant. It was very, very clever.
The look was a black and white logo of Peter Tosh of Bob Marley's Wailers in his Jamaican rude boy get-up. Jerry called him Walt Jabsco. He wore a pork pie hat, smart suit and tie, and shades. And it was this look that the band would adopt as a uniform. It fitted perfectly with the looming mod and skinhead revival.
I think that the image and visuals of the specials were at least 50% of its success.
Terry Hall.
Sometimes you have to hit a nail on the head really hard with a hammer to drive a message across, and people actually need to be made fully aware of what you're trying to say. And I think you've got to cover every aspect. You've got to cover how you look, what you say, your haircut, whatever, and then people tend to buy into it a bit easier.
Adopting this style had political benefits too. Here's Jerry again.
Part of the reason for adopting all that was because obviously there were elements in that audience that were going towards the far right, and we wanted to be able to influence them with the music that they would relate to, you know.
The Guardian's music writer Alexis Petridis.
If you play ska, it's traditionally skinhead music, you get a skinhead audience, and Dammers actually believed that if he got a skinhead audience, he could preach an anti-racist, leftist message to them, which is a fairly remarkable thing to do in a band. You don't get bands in 2008 forming because they think they can lure people away from fascism. You know, most people form bands because they want to get loads of birds.
By March 1979, the band were calling themselves the Special AKA. They recruited new drummer John Bradbury, and they'd recorded their debut single with a £700 loan from a local businessman. It borrowed heavily from Prince Buster's earlier ska classic Al Capone, and it made dark references to their infamous trip to Paris. It was the brilliant Gangsters. Special AKA could only afford to record one track, but they needed another for the flip side of the single. Coventry musician Neil Davies had recorded a demo with Special's drummer Brad some years previously. Here's Neil.
Linval came round to my flat one night and said, we've got Gangsters all mixed and everything, but we're short of a B-side. We'd really like to use your track that you recorded with Brad a couple of years ago. What do you think? I said, yes, please. Yeah, it was great. Great idea. So the two things were put together as a double A-side. We printed up these great paper sleeves. We rubber stamped them ourselves. We had a Special AKA Gangsters versus the Selector. And Two Tone was launched with that record, and it just immediately hit the right spot. It got huge amounts of airplay and became a massive hit.
The influential indie label Rough Trade pressed up 5,000 copies of Gangsters, backed by that instrumental called The Selector, distributed it themselves, and it immediately achieved cult status, helped along by Radio 1's John Peel and rave reviews in the music press. The Special AKA, as they were then, began a heavy touring schedule, opening up for bands like the UK Subs and The Damned. By the time Margaret Thatcher was voted into power in May 1979, the first pressing of Gangsters had sold out. Terry Hall.
I think we were sort of working for about 18 months before that, hoping to sort of reach that point, and it almost felt like, well, we deserved it, because when you know that you're doing something good, it breeds a lot of confidence, really. And it's like anything in life, you know whether you are going to do something or not. I think we all felt like we were ready for it, and it was time for it to happen.
And from a Radio 1 John Peel session in May 79, here's Concrete Jungle.
Be alright. Everyone wants to hurt me. Oh, baby, Jack in the city. I have
Special AKA were creating the biggest British buzz since the Sex Pistols, and they were in a perfect position to negotiate a lucrative record deal. But Jerry wanted to stay true to his two-tone vision, and he hung out for Chrysalis Records to offer him a deal that would guarantee Two-Tone releasing 6 singles a year. Jerry's vision of a Coventry Stax was becoming a reality. The Specials, Linville Golding.
We were one of the first band to actually have a record deal like that, where the major record company could not tell us what we could release. That never happened. We had the right to release whatever we want to release, and they had to fund it.
The Selectors, Neil Davies.
It was a fantastically original deal. I don't think anybody else had done that before. So it was more than the Specials signing a record deal. It was the Specials signing a label deal. It was creating the label Two-Tone within the label of Chrysalis.
The Gangsters single was re-released with the might of Chrysalis backing under their new name, The Specials. To promote it, they began a club tour in June of 1979. The single charted just outside the top 40 in early August. And when the tour reached London, Jerry asked a new 6-piece band he'd come across to support them. They were called Madness.
Madness, madness, they call it madness. Madness, madness, they call it madness. I'm about to explain that someone is losing their breath. Hey, madness, madness, I call it gladness.
Madness started out life in North London as the Invaders. Keyboard player Mike Barson.
Me and some of my mates, when we were growing up, were very interested in music. Well, me, Lee Thompson, saxophone, and Chris Foreman, guitar player, and I could play a little bit of piano, but we were all sort of interested in music, and ska and reggae we were big fans of, you know, and not particularly Bob Marley, but more like the early Desmond Dekker, sort of 70s, and Jimmy Cliff.
Propaganda ministers, propaganda ministers, I've got a heavy Jew. I'm gonna walk all over you, 'cause
Somebody came up with the idea of sort of starting a band. Chris bought a guitar and Lee got a hold of a saxophone and we started sort of rehearsing, yeah. And drums and the bass sort of came last, and then Suggs, he was spotted by our talent scout John Eslow, who was our drummer for some time, and they were in a pub in Hampstead, I believe, and they were going home one evening and singing. Suggs was singing at the top of his voice, walking down the street, and John Eslow spotted the talent and invited him down to rehearsals, yeah.
By 1979, Madness had a live set of originals and Jamaican covers and were gigging regularly around London. Their agenda was very different to the Specials.
We weren't into being political, no. Like, being political is sort of serious business, you know. I mean, I think it's hard to keep your integrity in those conditions, you know. And it's sort of about being uninhibited as well, you know. It's like you're not being too self-important, you know. Just being able to sort of make a bit of a fool of yourself, you know.
Ex-Sounds journalist Gary Bushell.
Madness were more into funfairs and musicals. So, and Ian Jury was as big an influence, I think, on the lyrics anyway, as the earlier reggae ska had been. And they had echoes of carnivals. It was almost like it was a very English reinvention of ska, because there was a lot of references to English culture in their lyrics, and it was very much kids growing up in London and having a party.
Madness was surprised to read about the Specials in the music press, as Mike remembers.
The Specials suddenly sort of appeared out of nowhere, which was sort of quite strange, because they were doing exactly the same sort of music as some of the music we were doing. We weren't just doing solely ska, we were doing lots of other stuff. But when we heard that and that started becoming successful, I must confess that we leant a little bit in that direction, yeah.
After Suggs met the Specials' Jerry Dammers at a Rock Against Racism gig, Jerry went to see Madness play.
It really was like a school band. Well, they were just about out of school, so they were just starting off. And I have to say, I don't think anybody else would have had the foresight to sign them up at that particular point. I think the one that did it for me was My Girl. They had this song, My Girl, and I just thought that's just a brilliant song. You know, it was really rough, but it had the potential there. And so that's why I said, look, you've got to do something on our label, you know.
We went in the recording studio with a friend of my brother, Clive Langer, who was sort of a bit of an amateur producer at the time. And then we went in, we did the Prince, and Prince sounded great, and it really sort of fitted exactly the ticket of a song to put on the two-tone label, you know, that really sort of fitted, and it all went very spiffingly.
And so The Prince became Two-Tone's second single, released in August 1979. The title was a reference to one of the band's heroes, ska pioneer Prince Buster.
An earthquake is erupting, but not in Orange Street. A ghost dance is preparing, you got to help us with your feet. If you're not in the mood to dance, step back, grab yourself a seat. This may not be uptown Jamaica, but we promise you a treat. Buster, pull me over with your boulder stance, shuffle me off my feet. Even though I'll keep on running, I'll never get to Orange Street. So I say there's not much left to say for the man who set the beat. So I'll leave it up to you out there to get him back on his feet.
Meanwhile, back in Coventry, Neil Davies was in a state of shock. As the composer of the Gangster single B-side, The Selector, he now found himself with a hit record. It was climbing the charts rapidly, and by early September it was spending 2 weeks at number 6.
Obviously, as soon as it started to sell like that, I thought, well, I better form a band again, really. Needed another band, so we got together from that basis.
Like Jerry Dammers, Neil had been playing on the Coventry music scene for years and was able to pull in some old acquaintances.
It was all of a sudden, met up with Charlie and H, Gaps, and they knew there's a guy, Commy, who was a guitar player, and then Desmond joined us, and Pauline came along to the rehearsals as well, and immediately she started singing. I just thought, fantastic.
Singer Pauline Black was determined to be more than your average front woman.
Madness, they were all cheeky chappies, all vaudeville kind of, you know, an image was a great big thing with them. The Specials, similarly, through the guidance of Jerry Dammers, had a very unified image. So when The Selector came along, and because we were predominantly black, so we very much were coming much more from the Caribbean culture, the rude boy look and stuff like that, I just adopted that look for myself and feminized it as much as I could, because I really didn't want to be the chick that stood there in the dress and doing all the ditzy dippy things that, you know, women were expected to do then.
With 6 black members and 1 white, The Selector were just as keen as the Specials to get a message across with their music.
One of our reasons to exist was to highlight racism and to say racism is bad. And we want to change things. We want to make people just think in a different way and get on with each other. So that was our stance when we were interviewed. We came across as very serious. We came across as very political. We came across as very opinionated, because we were deadly serious about it. And we'd like to talk about the music, but we'd equally like to talk about what Two-Tone really stood for.
After the success of the first Two-Tone single, Jerry Dammers was understandably keen to release a Selector record as soon as possible. Neil had a load of songs already written, and by August of 1979, the newly formed band was soon in the studio recording the third Two-Tone single, On My Radio. You're listening to Too Much Too Young, the Two-Tone story, with me, Paul Sexton, on Radio 2.
Radio at the time was a bit dull, you know, it needed freshening up. And John Peel was great in the evening and he'd play some fantastic music. But daytime radio was just cycling round the endless stuff that you really didn't want to hear.
On My Radio, played on the radio by Tony Blackburn or something, I mean, with a chorus refrain of it's just the same old show on my radio, and them not getting it, was hysterical, and still is.
In November of 1979, On My Radio climbed all the way to number 8. With Madness at number 16 a few weeks earlier, the two-tone invasion was well underway. The Specials were set to have another top 10 hit too, with their second two-tone release, a cover of Dandy Livingstone's Rude Boy anthem, A Message to You, Rudy.
Stop your messing around. Better think of your future. Time is straighten right out. Creating problems in town.
This record had two important new ingredients that would remain with the Specials throughout their career: horn players Dick Cuthbert and Rico Rodriguez. Rico was a Jamaican reggae legend. He played with ska pioneers the Scatterlights back in the 60s and even played on Dandy's original record, giving the Specials a direct link with Jamaican ska. Ghost Town producer John Collins.
I think Rico and Dick were very important to the sound of the Specials, and I think it's a very good choice, an astute choice of Jerry's to get them in.
Neville Staple.
When Dick and Rico came in, they gave it that Jamaican kind of horn sound, because Rico played in Scatterlight anyway, and Dick was always playing with Rico in different bands or sessions and stuff. So with the pair of them, they had this authentic, like, Jamaican-y sound.
When the Specials, the Selector and Madness performed on the same Top of the Pop show that November, it was official. Britain had turned two-tone. Two-tone became very popular very quickly. The Selector's Pauline Black.
I guess the first time I realised there was a real two-tone following was when we walked in the record company and suddenly everyone was all wearing black and white, and the record company, Chrysalis, which put out the two-tone label, was on Oxford Street. And when you walked down Oxford Street, all the shops were all decked out in black and white, and that was when I first became aware of the fact that, yes, I suppose, the people must be quite interested in this phenomena.
Two-tone fashion soon hit the streets as well. Journalist Gary Bushell.
With the Rude Boy look, you saw the comeback of the pork pie hat, you saw Harrington jackets, you had Crombies coming back in, you had two-tone tonic suits. That was a sort of general smart skinhead look. If you went round council estates, a whole generation of teenagers, it seemed, were dressing like two-tone. It really was widespread, to the extent that even youngsters coming back from youth clubs as young as 12 would be coming back singing special songs and aspiring to have all the gear. And it wasn't expensive gear. It was a lot cheaper than buying anything from Vivienne Westwood.
Specials, Madness and the Selector embarked on a huge 40-date two-tone tour across the UK.
Different one of the three bands would be headlining.
Mike Barson from Madness.
So one night it would be the Specials, one night it would be Madness, and one night it would be Selector. And then at the end we would all come on together and play a song together. And it was sort of tradition with the Specials that they would always come out jumping and moving and dancing and everything. I mean, I don't know if it was a little bit contrived, but it created a great energy.
As the two-tone circus passed through the UK's towns and cities, it began to take on a carnival atmosphere, with every gig a raucous party. Gary Bushell.
You didn't really dance to Black Sabbath. You didn't really dance to the Pistols. You might have pogoed to the Pistols or the Clash, but you weren't dancing. With the two-tone bands, suddenly everyone was dancing again, and you saw all the old skinhead dances coming back into fashion, and people just moving instead of jumping.
People talk about Specials gigs as being the greatest gigs anybody had ever seen.
Music journalist Alexis Petridis.
And you see footage of it and you think, yeah, bloody hell, that does look like the best gig I've ever seen. It looks amazing. What you have is this sort of bedlam. There seems to be loads of them on stage, all leaping around, really into it. And in the eye of the hurricane, you've got Terry Hall just standing there, totally emotionless, looking really miserable.
And Terry Hall.
I had that from about the age of 4. My friends' mums would say, "Well, you're looking so miserable, what's wrong with you?" And I gave up explaining when I was about 8. It was, okay, I'm miserable, I'm happy with that, it's cool. But with the gigs, it felt like a kindred spirit. It is fantastic when, you know, you get 1,000, 2,000 people all dancing and you can actually feel the building move. It's brilliant.
But it was still essentially a rock and roll tour, and selector singer Pauline Black was the only female.
I was probably there very gung-ho, very politically motivated about what I was singing about, what I was talking about, and the reason why I was there. And I suddenly became aware that actually 90% of the people on this bus with me weren't really sharing my particular idea. But there's nothing you can do about that. What can you do about that? I mean, me going around and saying, well, don't you think you should drink a little less before you go on stage? I mean, that's really going to get you brownie points, isn't it? So what I ended up doing was being some sort of refuge for young ladies who came back to the hotel for what turned out to be a little more than a cup of coffee. So you'd rescue all these poor sort of, you know, grizzling wenches in hotel corridors. So that was funny, yeah.
The Specials released their debut album on Two Tone in October of 1979. Most of the songs have been written by Jerry Dammers. Here's Terry Hall.
Jerry had a plan, and the idea was to put his plan into action. It was very much about Jerry's dream, and I didn't ever feel like I needed to question what he was doing because it was good. It's like, don't fix it if it isn't broke.
Elvis Costello produced the album, committing the band's energetic live set to vinyl.
Elvis had his quirky things, which I quite liked.
Here's Jerry.
You know, he'd do things like put the entire drum kit through a little Fender amp with distortion on and put it in the toilet and put a mic in there and stuff like that, which was great, you know, and he never thought of things like that.
Guardian music writer Alexis Petridis.
If you listen to it now, it absolutely conjures up this sort of image of Britain at the time. It has a universally bleak worldview. Everything is a bit rubbish on the first Specials album, you know. You go to a nightclub and all the women are slags and all the beer tastes just like piss, and everything, the political scene is really bad and there's violence lurking everywhere and you're probably going to get beaten up on your way home.
Sleep all day, it's the only way. I'm a parasite, I creep about at night. It's a cheap place to be. What am I doing here? Watching the girls go by, spending money on I don't work, 'cause I don't have to. I don't have to work. There's no what to do. I'm a member of the night club.
The Specials album track, Nightclub. In the same week, Madness released their debut album too. They decided to leave Two Tone and sign with Stiff Records. Mike Barson.
It was great for us to be a part of the Two Tone thing, but we didn't want to be just a part of the Two Tone thing. We've been striving as a band to, you know, be a band in our own rights.
One step beyond.
Both albums were instant hits, the Specials' self-titled debut peaking at number 4 and Madness's One Step Beyond at number 2. Mike Barson again.
It was like the lazy man's way to success, you know, we hardly had to do anything. The little bit of rehearsing, some people didn't even bother to turn up much. And then all of a sudden we were hitting it off, where some people have been like struggling for years, but it's something you can't really predict. It's like suddenly this sort of wave came and we just had to slightly turn left and we were on it, you know, and we were away.
And Jerry Dammers.
I was very surprised that it took off to the extent it did. I always thought we were going to be a sort of underground band, but I think that was the struggle really, to keep it to the original political ideals, even though that it had become very successful very quickly, and a lot of people saw it as a pop band, you know. So there was always that tension between the commercial side and trying to keep the creativity and the politics all involved in it, you know.
Two-Tone now had 4 hit records, and Jerry was keen to sign more bands. His plan was to have both the Specials and the Selector running the label, with the members acting as A&R scouts.
I think that the whole idea of Two-Tone initially was to launch other bands, and do one single. It wasn't really ongoing full record label that signed bands up forever. That would have just been too much work.
Terry Hall.
It was very odd because it was a record label that had success very, very quickly, but it wasn't really run as a record label. It was just an idea and a way that good bands could make records. And in theory, it's brilliant. Practically, it's not so great.
Two-Tone discovered their next bunch of hopefuls in Birmingham. Like Coventry and other industrial cities in the UK in 1979, Birmingham was having a rough time, as Dave Wakeling, a young musician in those days, remembers.
17% unemployment in the good areas and much worse elsewhere. There was a kind of fin de siècle vibe, people thought it was the end of the world coming. There seemed to be a kind of despondency brought about by the nuclear mushroom and Margaret Thatcher's gunboat version of the world. And so, as Birmingham, I think, many times has done, everybody just went down the pub and made the best of it. Would you like a nice cup of tea?
In the late 70s, Dave and his friend Andy Cox were infamous around Birmingham for their house parties. It was DJing at these parties that gave them the idea for the beat.
We found that if we played all punk singles, the place would become frenetic. Well, then it would burn out pretty quick. And if we played all dub reggae slates, as they're called, people would end up leaning against the wall, nodding their head as if they were dancing. But if we mixed them up, one of this, one of that, the dance floor stayed packed all night. So we were sitting there on the edge of the room the one night, and Andy Cox said to me, "Yes, but what if you could get the elements of both musics in the same 3-minute pop song? What would you have then, Dave?" And it was like, ding, punky reggae party, that's what you'd have.
Guitarists Dave Wakeling and Andy Cox formed the beat with bassist David Steele, drummer Everett Morton, vocalist Rankin Roger, and a sax player known simply as Saxa. But they nearly gave up before they'd started.
We'd heard a bit about the Specials. In fact, it had broken our hearts. We saw it in the Melody Maker as we were doing a rehearsal, and one of the band had said, "That's it, too late, somebody's done it." But we thought we'd carry on anyway.
Well, it was a good job they did, because in August of 1979 they supported the Selector, Neil Davies.
The first night they supported us, obviously went out to see them and stood by the mixing desk to watch them play and hear them play. I remember standing next to H and we looked at each other. They're on Two-Tone. As soon as they started playing, I said, we want them on Two-Tone. They're great.
Jerry Dammers agreed, and the beat was soon in the studio recording a single for Two-Tone. It was a cover of Smokey Robinson and the Miracles' Motown classic, Tears of a Clown.
It's only to come with blind spots.
By Christmas 1979, Tears of a Clown was on its way towards the UK top 10, so the first 5 releases on Two-Tone had sold hundreds of thousands of copies between them. With the beat half white and half black, they were another perfect example of the two-tone movement. But for Dave Wakeling, that was just coincidence. To him, the band were just a product of Birmingham.
So many of the things that we saw in sort of casual gigs around the pubs, they had musicians who were black and white, and we never thought anything about it. When we went to London, the first time we played, people were like, oh, that's kind of cool, isn't it, you know? Like black geezers and white geezers play together, I like that. And we're like, oh, yes, okay, if you like. Yes, we did that on purpose then. By the time we got to New York, they thought we were some sort of sociology group that was just using music to sort of explain our themes. But so long as they liked it, we were like, yes, that's right. That's why we did it.
But not everything went smoothly for the two-tone movement. As the 40-date label tour snowballed through the country towards the end of 1979, the bands would get a taste of something that would mar the whole scene, as Pauline Black remembers all too well.
As the two-tone tour progressed, it became apparent that yes, there was an element that wanted to be heard and did actively recruit outside gigs, did actively turn up and Zeke Heil at you, sort of, you'd be kind of knee-deep in Zeke Heiling skinheads at the front of a gig, and you'd be standing there and you think, I wonder why I'm here. I mean, which bit of two-tone, which bit of black people and white people being on a stage and making music did they not understand? I really didn't know.
When Thatcher's government came to power in 1979, it almost ended the National Front because many of their voters now favoured the Conservatives. The old National Front now had a problem. Here's The Guardian's Alexis Petridis.
One of the head guys in the National Front was a guy called Martin Webster, and his policy, when he realised that the National Front was not going to start winning council seats, by-elections, that kind of thing, was to specifically target football fans and skinheads, music fans, with the intention of sort of kicking their way into the headlines.
Don Letts was a punk and reggae DJ at the time.
That whole confusion where I think a lot of the early gigs, a lot of kind of National Front kids would show up, actually started in the punk days. I mean, that's why Rock Against Racism started. And they realised that they couldn't fool the punks anymore, so they went on to the two-tone scene.
As the tour continued, the racist element attaching itself to two-tone gigs got more intense. The Specials, Terry Hall.
It felt like every gig, but in reality, I don't think it was. But when it would escalate, it would get really bad.
And it got really bad at Hatfield Polytechnic on the 27th of October. The future singer with Body Snatchers, Rhoda Dakar, was there.
The first two-tone tour, we went up to Hatfield, and that was like a major, massive fight at that gig. Huge police, whatever. And the legend had it that somebody was there with an axe and they got hit with I don't know if it was ever true, but it was like a major, big fight, scrap, whatever.
While the Selector were on stage, around 30 men claiming to be the Hatfield Anti-Fascist League took it upon themselves to attack some of the two-tone audience with knives and razors. They claimed they were after National Front members, but the attacks appeared to be random.
I first got really upset by it at, I think, Hatfield Polytechnic when we turned up to the gig and the dressing room was just full of sort of kids with cuts and bruises and horrible stabbings and stuff, and it was our responsibility because we staged the gig. But when you feel like it's sort of getting out of control, it's very, very, very difficult. And it's like when you go to football, it's only a handful of people who are kicking off, but it can feel like a lot of people doing it at the time.
Violence aside, 1979 had been a brilliant year for the Specials. They'd started it borrowing money to record their first Indie 45 and ended it with their own label having 5 hit singles, a top 5 album and a sellout national tour. Could Two-Tone carry its success into the 1980s?
Once we had the popularity, the record company, I guess, was like, okay, we're going to get our money's worth out of these lads. And we were touring like nobody's business.
Jerry was never great at delegating, and that's always been his problem, but about trusting, especially members of your band, to do jobs.
They'd reached a point where they didn't seem to want to take my advice anymore, and it all got a bit not very pleasant.
Much too young. Now you're married with a kid when you could be having fun with me. Oh no, not doing the one big thing. You've done too much too young.
This is BBC Radio
6 Music.
6 Music.